Mercury sits 36 million miles from the Sun, closer than any other planet in our solar system. This tiny world is absolutely insane. For the next 20 minutes, you're going to see why Mercury is the most extreme planet we have ever found. A day longer than a year. All right, so imagine waking up on Mercury. You have your morning coffee, check your phone, you go to work, you come home, you watch some TV, you go to sleep. You wake up the next morning, and guess what? The sun's in the exact same spot in the sky. It's barely moved. One single day on Mercury lasts 176 Earth days. That's almost 6 months of daylight before you see a sunset. Meanwhile, an entire year on Mercury only takes 88 Earth days. So you would celebrate 2 birthdays before you even finish one day. Your second birthday would roll around and you would still be waiting for the sun to go down from the morning you woke up on your first birthday. The double sunrise. Now, here's where it gets even weirder. If you stood on certain parts of Mercury and watched the sunrise, the sun would come up over the horizon, stop moving and go backwards, and then rise again. The same thing happens at sunset. The sun sets, reverses, and sets a second time. You would think you were losing your mind. This happens because Mercury has the most egg-shaped orbit of any planet. Sometimes the planet's way closer to the sun, sometimes it's way farther away, and this messes with how the sun appears to move across the sky. The fastest planet in the solar system. Mercury absolutely flies through space. We're talking about 29 miles every single second. That's fast enough to get from New York to Los Angeles in about a minute and a half. If you could somehow drive a car at highway speed around the sun, it'd take you about 170 years to complete one orbit. Mercury does it in just 88 days. The ancient Romans watched this little dot zip across the night sky faster than anything else and named it after their messenger god because nothing else moved that quick. People have been fascinated by Mercury for at least 5,000 years, tracking it across the sky and wondering what was going on with this speedy little world. The smallest planet. So how big is Mercury? Well, it's tiny. The smallest planet in our solar system. If you held a nickel in your hand and pretended that was Earth, Mercury would be a blueberry sitting next to it. You could cram 18 Mercuries inside our planet and still have room left over. The thing is barely bigger than our moon. A giant iron cannonball. But here's where Mercury starts getting really weird. This tiny little planet is ridiculously heavy for its size, like suspiciously heavy. And the reason is wild. Mercury's basically a giant iron cannonball with a thin candy shell of rock around it. The iron core takes up 85% of the entire planet. Earth's core only takes up about 15%. Mercury is mostly core. If planets were apples, Mercury would be an apple that's almost entirely seed. The sun built Mercury's iron heart. Scientists spent decades trying to figure out why Mercury has such a massive iron center. The old theory was that giant space rocks smashed into Mercury billions of years ago and knocked off most of the rocky outer layers, leaving behind this dense iron ball. That sounded good for a while. Then, in 2021, researchers figured out what actually happened. The sun did it. When our solar system was brand new, there was this huge spinning cloud of dust and gas everywhere. The young sun had an incredibly powerful magnetic field, and that magnetic field pulled iron particles toward the center of the cloud, like a magnet pulling metal shavings across a table. Planets that formed close to the sun ended up stuffed with iron. Planets that formed farther away got less iron. Mercury formed right next to the sun, right where all that iron was piling up. This planet was born with a massive iron heart because the sun literally dragged the iron there. Ice on the hottest planet. Okay, now this next part's going to sound completely made up, but it's real. Mercury has ice on it. Frozen water ice. This planet sits so close to the sun that daytime temperatures hit 800 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt lead. Hot enough to melt zinc. Hot enough to melt tin. And yet there are billions of tons of ice just sitting on Mercury right now. Here's how that works. Mercury spins almost perfectly straight up and down. There's basically no tilt. This means the sun never gets high enough in the sky to shine down into certain craters near the poles. The floors of these craters have been in complete darkness for billions of years. No sunlight has touched them ever. When you never get any sunlight, you get cold. Really cold. These shadowed craters drop to minus 280 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than anywhere on Earth has ever been. Comets loaded with water have been crashing into Mercury for billions of years. Some of that water vapor floated over to these frozen dark craters and it just stayed there. Scientists think there might be 100 billion tons of ice hiding in those shadows, 20 meters deep in some spots. Ice on the planet closest to the sun. Nobody saw that coming. When researchers first proposed this idea, plenty of other scientists thought they were crazy. How could there possibly be ice on a planet that gets hot enough to melt metal? But data kept coming back saying the same thing. There's ice there. Lots of it. Mercury's full of contradictions like that. The most extreme temperature swings. Speaking of temperatures, Mercury holds the record for the most extreme temperature swing in the solar system. Daytime hits 800 degrees. Nighttime crashes down to minus 290 degrees. That's a difference of over 1,100 degrees between when the sun is up and when the sun is down. Nothing else in our solar system comes close to that kind of range. You'd need completely different gear for day and night. During the day, you would need heat shielding that could survive a furnace. At night, you'd need insulation rated for conditions colder than Antarctica has ever experienced. Same planet, same spot, completely opposite survival challenges depending on what time it is. Close to the sun, but not the hottest. And, by the way, Mercury's the closest planet to the sun, but it's not the hottest planet. Venus takes that title. Venus has this incredibly thick atmosphere that traps heat like a greenhouse on steroids. The surface stays at 900 degrees all the time, day or night. Mercury has almost no atmosphere. Scientists call what little Mercury has an exosphere because it's so thin it barely counts. Without an atmosphere to trap heat, all that warmth just escapes into space the second the sun goes down. Mercury's like a house with no insulation at all. Hot when the heater's blasting, freezing the moment you turn it off. A battered, cratered surface. The surface of Mercury looks like our moon got beaten up even worse. Craters everywhere. Gray dust covering everything. But Mercury's actually darker than the moon. And Mercury has way more craters because there's no weather to wear them down. No wind, no rain, nothing. Every single crater that ever formed on Mercury is still there, perfectly preserved for billions of years. The Caloris Basin, a planet-shaking impact. One crater is so massive you could drop the entire state of Texas into it. The Caloris Basin stretches 950 miles across, with mountains a mile high ringing the edges. Whatever hit Mercury to make that crater was enormous. The impact was so violent that shock waves traveled all the way through the planet and came out of the other side. On the exact opposite side of Mercury from this crater, there's an area of completely chaotic terrain, jumbled hills, weird formations, total geological chaos. The shock waves from that ancient impact scrambled the ground on the other side of the entire planet. A shrinking planet. Mercury also has these enormous cliffs running across the surface. Some of them stretch for hundreds of miles. Some of them are more than a mile tall. They look like giant wrinkles in the planet's skin, and that's basically what they are. Mercury is shrinking. The iron core has been cooling down for billions of years, and when it cools, it contracts. The surface has to crumple up to fit over a smaller core, like the skin of a grape that is drying into a raisin. Scientists estimate Mercury has shrunk by up to 14 kilometers in diameter since it first formed, and it's still shrinking right now. Some of the smaller cliffs are only about 50 million years old, which in planet terms is basically yesterday. The hollows. Mercury's evaporating. There are also these weird bright spots all over Mercury called hollows. They look like flat-bottomed pits, thousands of them scattered across the surface. Scientists think they're forming right now as buried materials heat up and turn directly into gas, escaping into space and leaving these depressions behind. Mercury is literally evaporating in certain spots. A tiny planet with its own magnetic field. Here's something else that makes Mercury special. The planet has its own magnetic field. Venus doesn't have one. Mars doesn't have one. Our moon doesn't have one. But little Mercury, the smallest planet in the solar system, generates its own magnetic shield. It's weak, only about 1% as strong as Earth's magnetic field, but it exists because Mercury still has liquid iron sloshing around inside. Part of the core is molten and moving, and that movement generates magnetism. Magnetic tornadoes and a comet-like tail. The magnetic field does some bizarre things, though. Scientists found these twisted tubes of magnetic energy connecting Mercury's magnetic field to open space. They call them flux transfer events, but they basically act like massive magnetic tornadoes. Some of them are 800 kilometers wide. They open holes in Mercury's magnetic shield and let solar wind blast directly onto the surface. Earth has similar events, but Mercury's are 10 times more intense. Mercury even has a tail. Solar wind slams into the planet and knocks sodium atoms off the surface. These atoms stream away from the sun, creating a ghostly tail behind Mercury like a comet. You can't see it with your eyes, but special cameras can pick it up. Exploring Mercury, past, present, and future. Only 3 spacecraft have ever gone to Mercury. Mariner 10 flew by 3 times back in 1974 and 1975. Then more than 30 years passed before anyone went back. Messenger orbited Mercury from 2011 to 2015, discovered the ice, confirmed the massive core, and mapped the entire surface before crashing into the planet when it ran out of fuel. Right now, a spacecraft called BepiColombo is heading to Mercury. It launched in 2018 and has already flown past the planet 6 times to slow down enough to enter orbit. The spacecraft will arrive in late 2026 and spend years studying mysteries that we still can't explain, like why Mercury has volatile elements on its surface that should have been boiled away by the sun ages ago, or exactly how the magnetic field works inside that giant iron core. The planet of surprises. Mercury orbits in the harshest environment imaginable, blasted by radiation, roasted during endless days, frozen during endless nights, shrinking from the inside and covered in craters from billions of years of impacts. The smallest planet has the biggest surprises and the most extreme conditions. Scientists keep finding things on Mercury that nobody predicted, and there's a good chance the biggest discoveries have not happened yet.